Sarah Martinez sat in the corner of the military hospital waiting area, her left arm secured in a sling with bandages covering her ribs. Overhead lights hummed while she watched people enter and exit. She'd been there for 3 hours without saying a word. That's who she was now, someone who didn't complain. 2 weeks earlier, during what should have been simple rappelling practice at Fort Bragg, everything went wrong. Her rope broke when she was 20 feet up. She crashed into the rocky ground below, shattering 2 ribs and throwing her shoulder out of place. Fellow soldiers rushed over to help, but Sarah turned them away, claiming she could handle it despite blood running down her face. Now, sitting in that cold, sterile room, she thought about the path that brought her here. She grew up in a tiny Texas town as the quietest member of her family. Her 3 brothers were rowdy and wild, constantly causing chaos and demanding everyone's attention. Sarah figured out young that staying invisible kept her safe. On nights when her father came home drunk, which happened most evenings, she'd hide in her bedroom with books about distant lands and courageous heroes. Nobody expected her to enlist. Her school counselor pushed her toward nursing or teaching, jobs that seemed better suited for such a timid girl, but Sarah had different ideas. She needed to show herself she was tougher than people believed. She wanted to defend her nation and discover the bravery she felt was missing inside. Boot camp was merciless. Drill sergeants yelled at new recruits from sunrise to sunset, testing every limit they had. Other recruits collapsed in tears or shouted back in anger, but Sarah absorbed it all without speaking. She finished every task, obeyed every command, and never raised her voice in protest. The other recruits noticed that the Texas girl never seemed to break. After completing basic, Sarah joined the 82nd Airborne Division. She worked in logistics and supply, ensuring troops received what they needed exactly when they needed it. It wasn't glamorous work, but Sarah tackled it with fierce determination. She stayed longer than required, verified every list twice, and volunteered for additional tasks without prompting. Her supervisor, Sergeant Rodriguez, took notice of her dedication. He frequently told other leaders that Private Martinez was the most dependable soldier under his command. She never missed work, never grumbled about duties, and somehow solved supply headaches that stumped veterans. Despite her skills, Sarah remained mostly invisible on the base. The rappelling incident changed that invisibility in unexpected ways. When she hit the earth, her first thought was to stand up and keep going. Even badly injured, she tried dismissing her teammates' worry. Only a direct order from her commanding officer convinced her to get medical help. At the base hospital, the emergency doctor was shocked by how much pain she could endure. She sat calmly through his examination, responding with brief yes or no answer. When he said she'd need surgery to fix her shoulder properly, she simply nodded and asked when she could work again. The doctor looked at her with mixed admiration and concern. The operation went smoothly, but healing proved harder than getting hurt. For someone used to constant activity and usefulness, sitting idle felt like torture. Sarah filled her days studying military handbooks and learning advanced logistics methods. Anything to occupy her thoughts. She refused strong painkillers, insisting basic ibuprofen was plenty. Her family wanted to visit, but Sarah discouraged them. She told her mother by phone that everything was fine and she'd return to duty soon. Her brothers offered to make the trip from Texas, but she insisted it wasn't needed. Sarah had learned long ago to solve her own problems, and this injury was no exception. The other patients in the waiting area were mostly young soldiers, though some appeared more seriously hurt. A young Marine with burned hands sat opposite her, while an older Army sergeant with a cast on his leg dozed in a wheelchair. Sarah quietly observed everyone, noting how some complained loudly about waiting, while others sat in silence like her. A nurse finally called her name, and Sarah carefully stood, protecting her injured side. She followed the nurse through a long corridor, decorated with posters about military service and sacrifice. The exam room was compact and plain, with one window overlooking the base's parade ground. Sarah watched soldiers drilling in perfect formation. While waiting for the doctor, Sarah considered her military future. The injury would delay her training, and she worried about falling behind her colleagues in advancement. She'd been preparing for promotion tests before the accident, and the setback frustrated her more than the physical discomfort. Military success meant everything. It was her chance to prove her value in ways she never could growing up. The exam room door swung open, and Sarah automatically straightened her back. She expected her regular doctor, but instead a tall man in camouflage entered. His uniform showed Navy SEAL medic insignia, and his composed, confident presence immediately earned respect. Sarah had never encountered a SEAL before, and wondered why someone of his status was in a regular Army hospital. He gave his name as Petty Officer Marcus Thompson, and explained he was temporarily stationed at the hospital while recovering from deployment injury. Sarah nodded politely but stayed quiet, curious about what would happen next. She had no clue this meeting would transform her entire military path and make her face truths about herself she'd hidden for years. Marcus Thompson had treated countless injured soldiers during his 8 years as a Navy SEAL medic, but something felt different about the young woman sitting on the examination table. Most patients either complained endlessly or tried acting brave by making jokes. This soldier did neither. She sat perfectly motionless, maintaining military posture despite clear pain, and waited patiently for him to start. He quickly reviewed her chart, noting her injury details and the surgery she'd received. Private First Class Sarah Martinez, 82nd Airborne, Logistics Specialist. Notes from previous visits painted a picture of an unusually tough patient who rarely spoke and never complained. She'd barely requested pain medication and had been asking about returning to duty since the day after surgery. Marcus was temporarily at Fort Bragg's medical center while his own shoulder healed. Shrapnel from an Afghan IED explosion had torn through his muscle, requiring major surgery and therapy. Unlike most SEALs who hated desk duty, Marcus actually welcomed the change. It let him observe different soldiers and study how they handled hardship. During his examination, Marcus noticed several unusual things about Sarah. Her muscles were more developed than typical for a logistics specialist. Her hands showed calluses, matching extensive rope work and combat training. Most revealing, when he tested her reflexes and movement, her responses were controlled and precise in ways suggesting training beyond basic Army instruction. Sarah answered his questions with minimal words, providing only what was directly asked. When he inquired about her pain level from 1 to 10, she said 3, though her expressions suggested much higher. When he asked about sleep, she simply said it was adequate. Marcus had worked with enough special operations people to recognize when someone was downplaying their condition. During the physical exam, Marcus tested Sarah's grip and was surprised by the results. Even with her injured shoulder, her left hand measured significantly above average for female soldiers. He casually mentioned this, and for the first time, Sarah's controlled expression flickered with something like surprise or worry. Marcus decided on a different approach. Instead of focusing only on current injuries, he started asking about her background and training. Sarah gave standard responses about her assignment and duties, but Marcus pushed deeper. He asked about fitness scores, combat certifications, and career ambitions. With each question, Sarah became slightly more guarded, though she kept answering honestly. The breakthrough came when Marcus mentioned seeing her read a field manual on advanced tactical medicine while waiting. It was an unusual choice for a logistics specialist, requiring security clearance and special training to access. Sarah's face went completely blank, and she said she'd borrowed it from someone. Marcus knew she was lying, but recognized the look of someone protecting secrets they couldn't share. Over the next 20 minutes, Marcus used techniques from SEAL training to gather information without seeming to interrogate. He shared stories about his own special operations experiences, watching Sarah's reactions carefully. When he mentioned long-range reconnaissance missions, her breathing shifted slightly. When he described advanced trauma procedures, she leaned forward almost imperceptibly. Most revealing, when he casually referenced a classified Virginia training facility, Sarah's eyes widened before she caught herself. Marcus started assembling a picture that didn't match Sarah's official file. Her physical condition, knowledge, and reactions all suggested someone with far more training than a typical logistics specialist. He began wondering if Private Martinez might be involved in activities not reflected in her standard record. The conversation took an interesting turn when Marcus asked about her rappelling injury. Sarah described the accident in clinical detail, but Marcus noticed she used terminology and tactical awareness, unusual for someone managing supply. When he pressed for specifics about the exercise itself, Sarah became evasive, claiming trauma had clouded her memory. Marcus had conducted enough debriefings to know when someone was hiding information. Sarah's story held together, but felt rehearsed, as if she'd been coached on exactly what to share and what to leave out. Her medical record showed previous injuries, uncommon for logistics personnel, including what looked like knife wounds on her arms and evidence of multiple cleanly healed bone fractures. As the examination continued, Marcus grew genuinely curious about Sarah's past. In the special operations world, rumors circulated about highly classified programs recruiting soldiers from regular units for specialized training. These programs were so secretive that even SEAL medics rarely encountered participants. Soldiers involved maintained their original jobs as cover while receiving training that transformed them into elite operators. Sarah's combination of exceptional physical conditioning, advanced tactical knowledge, and elaborate security measures suggested she might belong to such a program. Marcus had met other soldiers displaying similar traits, individuals whose official records barely resembled their actual capabilities and assignments. When Marcus finished examining her, he faced a difficult choice. As a medical professional, his main responsibility was Sarah's health and recovery, but as a special operations veteran, he was intensely curious about her true background and training. He also recognized that if Sarah was involved in classified work, his questions might make her uncomfortable or compromise her security. Marcus decided to test his theory with a carefully phrased question. He asked Sarah if she'd received training in combat medical procedures beyond basic first aid all soldiers learned. It seemed innocent enough, explained by his observation of her reading material, but Sarah's reaction confirmed his suspicion. For the first time during the appointment, Sarah's composure cracked slightly. She paused before answering, and when she spoke, her response was carefully measured. She said she'd received some extra medical training for logistics duties, nothing beyond what any soldier might need. But Marcus noticed she avoided eye contact, and her body language suggested she struggled with how much truth to reveal. The appointment ended with Marcus giving standard medical advice about recovery timeline and physical therapy. But as she prepared to leave, he made a decision that would change both their lives. Instead of letting her walk out with secrets intact, Marcus asked a question that cut straight to what he suspected about her background and training. Marcus looked directly into Sarah's eyes as she gathered her things. The question hung between them, simple yet loaded with implications that could change everything. He decided to take a calculated risk, one that could either reveal the truth he suspected or end his involvement in what was clearly a carefully protected secret. "Where did you really learn to tie a prusik knot with your weaker hand while under pressure?" Marcus asked quietly. The question struck Sarah like a punch. She froze completely, her hand halfway to the door. The prusik knot was an advanced climbing technique, used mainly by special forces for emergency rope work. More importantly, the specific version Marcus referenced was taught only in highly classified programs. No logistics specialist would know how to perform it, let alone execute it instinctively during crisis. Marcus had noticed the callus patterns on Sarah's hands during examination. Hidden among normal wear marks from military gear were very specific friction burns, matching advanced rope techniques. Combined with her unusual muscle development and tactical knowledge, it painted a picture of someone with far more training than her official record showed. Sarah's mind raced as she tried forming a response. She'd spent 3 years maintaining her cover, never once slipping or revealing details about her real training. Her handlers had drilled into her the importance of absolute security. Even a minor slip could compromise not just her mission, but the entire program she represented. The program Sarah belonged to didn't officially exist. Selected soldiers from regular units were quietly recruited for specialized training, transforming them into deep cover operatives. They maintained their original military jobs and identities while conducting missions requiring absolute deniability. Sarah's logistics position gave her access to supply chains and transportation networks, making her invaluable for certain operations. For the past 18 months, Sarah had been conducting intelligence missions throughout the southeastern United States. Her official duties, moving supplies and coordinating logistics, provided perfect cover for her real work, mapping domestic security vulnerabilities and tracking potential threats. The repelling accident happened during training for an upcoming mission, not the routine exercise described in her records. Standing in the exam room, Sarah realized she faced an impossible choice. Continuing to lie to Marcus would be relatively simple, but she sensed he already knew more than he revealed. His question about the prusik knot wasn't lucky guessing. It resulted from careful observation and professional expertise. Trying to maintain cover with someone of his caliber might prove more dangerous than partial honesty. Marcus watched Sarah's internal struggle play across her face. He'd seen similar expressions on captured enemy operatives when confronted with evidence of their true identities. The difference was Sarah wasn't an enemy. She was a fellow American service member, involved in something requiring extraordinary security. After what felt like forever but was probably only seconds, Sarah made her decision. She turned back toward Marcus and met his eyes. When she spoke, her voice was steady but carried undertones of resignation. "I can't discuss my training background," Sarah said carefully, "but I can tell you that your observation skills are very sharp for a medic." It wasn't a full confession, but acknowledgement enough for Marcus. He nodded slowly, understanding the delicate position Sarah found herself in. As a SEAL, he was familiar with the world of classified operations and the burden of maintaining cover stories, even with fellow military personnel. Marcus realized he'd placed Sarah in an unfair position by pressing about her background. Whatever program she was involved in clearly required absolute secrecy, and his curiosity had forced her to choose between compromising her mission and lying to a medical professional. He decided to offer her an escape from the uncomfortable situation he'd created. "I apologize if my question seemed inappropriate," Marcus said. "As a medic, I sometimes notice things about patients not directly related to their treatment. Please know that anything discussed in this room falls under medical confidentiality." Sarah felt relief wash over her at Marcus's words. The medical confidentiality clause gave her legal protection for anything she might have accidentally revealed. More importantly, his apology suggested he understood the difficult spot he'd put her in and wasn't planning to pursue it further. But Marcus wasn't finished. His next words caught Sarah completely off guard. "However," he continued, "I should mention that your current injury pattern matches a specific type of training accident I've seen before. If you ever need to discuss the real circumstances of your injury for medical reasons, I have the security clearance to handle sensitive information." Sarah's mouth fell open slightly. Marcus was telling her he not only suspected her true background, but also had proper clearances to discuss classified matters. This changed everything about their interaction and opened possibilities she hadn't considered. The truth was Sarah's injuries were more serious than her official records indicated. The rappelling accident had been complicated by specialized equipment she'd been carrying that couldn't be mentioned in standard reports. One piece of gear had caused additional internal injuries requiring careful monitoring, but Sarah hadn't been able to discuss these details with regular doctors. Marcus saw the shift in Sarah's expression and knew he'd offered exactly what she needed. As a SEAL medic with top-secret clearance, he was one of few medical professionals who could provide treatment while maintaining the security requirements her situation demanded. Sarah found herself at a crossroads. She could continue maintaining her cover completely, accepting limited medical care, and potentially compromising her long-term health. Or she could trust this Navy SEAL medic who seemed to understand both her situation and the constraints she operated under. The decision came down to a simple question: was her mission more important than her health? Sarah had been trained to sacrifice everything for operational security, but she also knew an operator who couldn't perform at peak capacity was a liability to everyone involved. Looking at Marcus, Sarah made another calculated decision. She would test his trustworthiness with a small piece of truth and see how he handled it. If he proved reliable, she might be able to get the medical care she really needed. If not, she could always fall back on her original cover. "The rappelling accident involved some equipment that isn't in my standard gear list," Sarah said slowly. "There may be complications from my injuries that I haven't been able to discuss with other medical personnel." Marcus nodded gravely. He understood Sarah was offering him a glimpse into her real situation, and he knew the significance of that trust. His response would determine whether she continued confiding in him or disappeared back into whatever shadowy program had trained her. Marcus immediately understood the gravity of what Sarah had just revealed. Her admission about specialized equipment meant she was trusting him with information that could potentially compromise classified operations. He needed to handle this moment carefully, both for her safety and to maintain the trust she'd just extended. "I think we should continue this conversation in a more secure environment," Marcus said, checking his watch. "I have access to a SEAF on base where we can discuss your medical situation without concerns about security protocols." A SEAF-sensitive compartmented information facility was a specially constructed room designed to prevent electronic surveillance and unauthorized access. The fact Marcus had access to such facilities confirmed Sarah's growing suspicion that he was much more than just a regular Navy medic temporarily at Fort Bragg. Sarah agreed, and Marcus arranged for them to meet the following morning. He provided specific instructions about accessing the secure facility, details demonstrating his familiarity with classified protocols. As Sarah left the medical facility, she felt both relief and apprehension. For the first time in 3 years, she might be able to discuss her real medical needs with someone who understood the constraints of her situation. That evening, Sarah contacted her handler using established protocol. Colonel Patricia Hayes was a veteran intelligence officer who oversaw several deep cover operatives like Sarah. The colonel listened carefully as Sarah described her encounter with the SEAL medic and his offer to provide treatment within appropriate security guidelines. Colonel Hayes was initially skeptical. The program employing Sarah was so highly classified that even most generals weren't aware of its existence. The idea of bringing in an outside medical professional, regardless of his clearance level, represented a significant security risk. However, she also recognized Sarah's injuries required specialized attention that couldn't be provided through normal channels. After several encrypted calls and database searches, Colonel Hayes discovered Marcus Thompson wasn't just any Navy SEAL medic. His record showed multiple deployments with highly classified special operations units, including assignments requiring the highest security levels. More intriguingly, his medical training included specialized courses in treating operatives from sensitive programs. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the designated SEAF 15 minutes early, a habit ingrained through years of military discipline. Marcus was already there, reviewing what appeared to be medical texts and classified technical manuals. The secure room was sterile and windowless, equipped with white noise generators and signal blocking technology, creating an environment where sensitive conversations could happen safely. Marcus had spent the previous evening researching Sarah's background, using resources available only to personnel with his clearance level. What he discovered confirmed his suspicions about her involvement in classified activity. While he couldn't access all details of her assignments, he found enough information to understand the general nature of her work and medical complications it might create. Sarah entered the SEAF and immediately felt more comfortable than she had in months. The secure environment meant she could finally discuss her real situation without fear of compromising operational security. For someone who'd been living a carefully constructed lie for 3 years, the prospect of honesty was both liberating and terrifying. Marcus began by explaining his own background, revealing details not in his standard military record. He'd served with Task Force 60, a highly classified unit conducting operations requiring complete deniability. His medical training included treating operatives from various intelligence agencies and special operations commands. Most importantly, he had extensive experience maintaining medical confidentiality for personnel whose true identities and missions couldn't be revealed. With Marcus's credentials established, Sarah felt comfortable enough to describe her real injuries. The rappelling accident had been complicated by specialized communication equipment she'd been wearing during training. When her rope failed, the equipment had been driven into her ribs, causing internal injuries beyond the broken bones mentioned in her official records. More seriously, Sarah had been experiencing symptoms suggesting possible nerve damage from the accident. She'd been hiding numbness in her left hand and occasional dizziness that could compromise her operational effectiveness. These symptoms were potentially career-ending for someone in her position, but she hadn't been able to seek appropriate treatment without revealing classified details about how the injuries occurred. Marcus listened carefully as Sarah described her symptoms, taking notes and asking follow-up questions demonstrating both medical expertise and understanding of unique challenges faced by covert operatives. His questions were precise and professional, focused on gathering information needed to provide proper treatment while maintaining appropriate security protocols. As the medical consultation continued, Marcus revealed additional information about his own situation. His assignment to Fort Bragg wasn't just for his own recovery. He was also conducting a classified study on medical support for deep cover operatives. Sarah's case represented exactly the type of situation his research was designed to address. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Sarah had been trying to hide her true background from medical personnel, while Marcus had been specifically assigned to identify and treat operatives like her. Their chance encounter in the hospital waiting room had brought together exactly the right people at exactly the right time. Marcus proposed a treatment plan, addressing Sarah's real medical needs while maintaining security requirements of her position. He could provide specialized therapy for her nerve damage using techniques developed specifically for special operations personnel. The treatment would be documented using medical codes that wouldn't reveal the true nature of her injuries or suggest involvement in classified activities. More importantly, Marcus offered something Sarah hadn't expected to find: professional understanding. As someone who'd lived his own version of a double life in the special operations community, he understood the psychological toll of maintaining constant operational security. He recognized Sarah's stoic demeanor wasn't just military discipline. It was the result of years of never being able to show weakness or vulnerability. Sarah felt a weight lifting from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized she was carrying. For the first time since joining the program, she was interacting with someone who understood both her medical needs and the constraints of her operational security. The relief was almost overwhelming. But as their conversation deepened, both Sarah and Marcus began realizing their professional relationship might develop into something more complex. The trust required for her to reveal classified information created an intimacy going beyond typical medical care. They were both highly trained individuals who'd spent years maintaining emotional distance from others, yet they found themselves connecting in ways that surprised them both. The session concluded with Marcus scheduling a series of follow-up appointments to monitor Sarah's recovery and provide specialized treatment. As they prepared to leave the SEF, Marcus made an observation that would prove prophetic about their future relationship. Marcus paused at the door of the SEF and turned back to Sarah with an expression both professional and personal. In all my years treating special operations personnel, I've never met someone who carries the weight of secrecy as heavily as you do, he said quietly. That level of compartmentalization might be necessary for your mission, but it's not healthy for long-term psychological well-being. Sarah was taken aback by his observation. Throughout her training and operational career, she'd been praised for her ability to maintain perfect operational security, never once breaking character or revealing classified information. The idea that this strength might also be a weakness had never occurred to her. Over the following weeks, Sarah attended regular treatment sessions with Marcus in the secure medical facility. The specialized therapy he provided was unlike anything she'd experienced in conventional military medicine. His techniques were specifically designed for operatives whose bodies had been subjected to extreme physical demands and whose minds carried the burden of classified knowledge. During these sessions, Marcus gradually helped Sarah understand her injuries were more complex than simple physical trauma. Years of living a double life had created psychological tensions, manifesting in physical symptoms. Her body was holding stress in ways conventional medical treatment couldn't address because doctors didn't understand the unique pressures she faced. As Sarah's physical condition improved, she found herself looking forward to appointments for reasons beyond medical necessity. Marcus was the first person in years with whom she could have completely honest conversations. The security protocols governing their interactions created a safe space where she could temporarily drop the facade she maintained everywhere else. Marcus noticed similar changes in his own behavior. His assignment to study medical support for covert operatives had been purely professional, but working with Sarah had awakened personal feelings he hadn't experienced since before his special operations career. He found himself thinking about her between appointments, wondering about her life outside their clinical meetings. The turning point in their relationship came during a therapy session focused on treating Sarah's nerve damage. The procedure required Marcus to work closely with pressure points along her spine, a treatment demanding both physical proximity and complete trust. As he worked, Sarah found herself relaxing in ways she hadn't allowed herself to do in years. For the first time, Sarah began talking about her life before the military and experiences that shaped her into someone who valued invisibility and silence. She described growing up in a household where drawing attention was dangerous, where staying quiet and unnoticed was a survival strategy rather than a personality trait. Marcus listened without judgment, understanding now why Sarah had adapted so naturally to covert operations. The skills making her excellent at maintaining cover weren't just professional training, they were deeply ingrained survival mechanisms developed during childhood. Her ability to disappear into any role or identity came from years of practice in her own family. As Sarah's story unfolded, Marcus began sharing his own background in greater detail. His path to special operations had been different, but equally driven by a need to prove himself. Coming from a military family where service was expected, Marcus had pushed himself to excel in increasingly dangerous and challenging assignments, partly to live up to family expectations and partly to find his own identity. The conversations during therapy sessions evolved from purely medical discussions to deeper explorations of identity, purpose, and the costs of their chosen career. Both Sarah and Marcus were discovering their professional facades, while necessary for their work, had also isolated them from meaningful human connections. Sarah's handler, Colonel Hayes, became aware of the developing relationship through routine monitoring of her operatives' activity. Initially concerned about potential security breaches, the colonel investigated Marcus thoroughly and discovered his own handlers had been observing his interactions with Sarah with interest. What neither Sarah nor Marcus knew was their relationship was being watched by multiple intelligence agencies as an unofficial test case. The military was increasingly concerned about psychological costs of deep cover operations and was looking for ways to provide support to operatives without compromising security. Their developing connection represented a potential model for how such relationships might work. As weeks turned into months, Sarah's physical recovery progressed beyond all expectations. Her nerve damage was healing properly, her strength was returning, and she was medically cleared for return to full operational status. However, both she and Marcus were reluctant to end their therapeutic relationship, knowing it would mean returning to the isolation their careers demanded. The situation became more complicated when Sarah received orders for a new assignment, taking her overseas for an extended period. The mission was critical and would utilize all her specialized training, but it would also mean ending her relationship with Marcus, just as it was developing into something meaningful. Marcus faced his own professional dilemma. His research project was nearing completion and he was scheduled to return to active SEAL operations within the month. The timing meant both he and Sarah would be returning to their respective operational roles, just as they'd found someone who understood the unique challenges of their career. During what they both knew might be their final therapy session, Marcus and Sarah finally addressed the personal feelings that had developed between them. The conversation was complicated by security protocols limiting what they could discuss about their future assignments and the uncertainty of when or if they might see each other again. Sarah found herself facing an emotional challenge she wasn't trained to handle. Throughout her adult life, she'd avoided personal attachments that might compromise her operational effectiveness. The military had taught her emotional connections were vulnerabilities enemies could exploit. Yet her relationship with Marcus had improved both her mental health and her professional performance. Marcus struggled with similar conflict. SEAL training emphasized the importance of unit cohesion and brotherhood, but also warned against personal relationships that might affect judgment during combat operations. His growing feelings for Sarah represented exactly the kind of emotional complication his instructors had warned against. As their final session concluded, both Sarah and Marcus realized they were at a crossroads that would determine not just the future of their relationship, but their entire approach to balancing professional duty with personal happiness. The choice they made would set the pattern for the rest of their military careers and beyond. Standing outside the SESIF after their last official appointment, Marcus made a decision that surprised both of them. Instead of saying goodbye and walking away, he proposed something that would require them both to take unprecedented risks with their carefully compartmentalized lives. Marcus looked at Sarah with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I want to request reassignment to wherever you're going," he said simply. "Not officially and not as your medical officer. I want to be assigned as operational support for your mission." Sarah stared at him and what Marcus was suggesting was unprecedented and potentially career-ending for both of them. Operational assignments were based on mission requirements and security clearances, not personal relationships. For a Navy SEAL to request assignments, supporting an Army deep cover operative would raise questions neither of them could answer honestly, but Marcus had done his research. His background investigation had revealed Sarah's upcoming mission would be conducted in a region where Navy Special Operations had parallel interests. With careful coordination between their respective commands, it might be possible to arrange complementary assignments, allowing them to maintain their professional relationship while serving their operational requirements. Sarah's initial reaction was to refuse immediately. Everything in her training told her mixing personal feelings with professional duties was dangerous and potentially catastrophic. She'd spent years building a reputation as someone who could be trusted with the most sensitive assignments because she never allowed personal considerations to affect her judgment. However, as she considered Marcus's proposal, Sarah realized their relationship had actually improved her operational effectiveness rather than compromising it. Having someone who understood the psychological pressures of her work had made her more stable and focused, not less. Her performance during recent training exercises had been better than ever, partly because she no longer carried the burden of complete emotional isolation. Marcus pressed his case by explaining the practical benefits of their collaboration. His medical expertise could provide operational support traditional mission planners might overlook. Her deep cover skills could enhance his own mission effectiveness in ways pure special operations training couldn't provide. Together, they represented a combination of capabilities that could be genuinely valuable to their respective commands. The conversation was interrupted when Colonel Hayes appeared unexpectedly outside the US. Sarah's handler had been monitoring their interaction and had decided it was time to intervene directly. Her expression was unreadable as she approached the two operatives. Mr. Thompson, Martinez, I think we need to have a conversation, the colonel said formally, using their cover names even in the secure area. Please join me in conference room C. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Colonel Hayes's sudden appearance could only mean their relationship had been deemed a security risk. She prepared herself for the end of both her career and any possibility of a future with Marcus. As they walked to the conference room, she tried mentally rehearsing explanations that might minimize damage to Marcus's career. Conference Room C was another secure facility equipped with advanced communication systems and multiple screens displaying classified information. As they entered, Sarah noticed several other people were already present, including a Navy commander she didn't recognize and a civilian who had the unmistakable bearing of senior intelligence leadership. Colonel Hayes gestured for Sarah and Marcus to sit, then took her place at the head of the conference table. The atmosphere was formal and tense, exactly what Sarah had expected for a disciplinary meeting that would end both their careers. Before either of you says anything, Colonel Hayes began, I want you to know your developing relationship has been under observation since your first meeting. This wasn't surveillance in the traditional sense, but rather an assessment of how personal connections might affect operational security and mission effectiveness. Sarah felt her face flush with embarrassment and anger. The idea that her most private moments had been watched and analyzed made her feel violated in ways she hadn't experienced since childhood. Marcus's jaw tightened as he processed the implications of what the colonel was saying. Colonel Hayes continued before either of them could respond. What we discovered was unexpected and potentially revolutionary for how we support deep cover operatives. Ms. Martinez, your psychological evaluations and performance metrics have improved dramatically since you began working with Mr. Thompson. Your stress indicators are down, your decision-making speed has increased, and your operational security remains perfect. The Navy commander leaned forward and addressed Marcus directly. Petty Officer Thompson, our analysis shows similar improvements in your own performance indicators. More importantly, your research into medical support for covert operatives has produced insights we believe could transform how we care for personnel in high-stress assignments. Sarah struggled to process what she was hearing. Instead of being disciplined for compromising security, they were apparently being praised for inadvertently demonstrating new approaches to operational support. The civilian at the table, who introduced himself only as Mr. Chen from an unnamed agency, explained the broader implication. The military has been struggling with retention and psychological health issues among special operations personnel, Mr. Chen said. Traditional approaches emphasizing complete emotional isolation are proving counterproductive in the long term. Your relationship represents a potential model for how we might provide meaningful support while maintaining necessary security protocols. Colonel Hayes pulled up several documents on the room's main screen, showing statistical analyses of Sarah and Marcus's performance over the past several months. The data clearly demonstrated their personal relationship had enhanced rather than compromised their professional capability. We're prepared to offer both of you an unprecedented opportunity, the colonel said. We want to formalize your partnership as part of an experimental program pairing deep cover operatives with specialized support personnel. You would work together on assignments, utilizing both your skill sets, while serving as a test case for this new operational model. Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances, both struggling to understand how their personal relationship had somehow become a matter of national security interest. The proposal being offered was beyond anything they'd imagined possible. The Navy commander provided additional details about how such an arrangement would work. Marcus would receive additional training in intelligence operations while maintaining his medical specialization. Sarah would expand her skill set to include coordination with special operations teams. Together, they would take on missions requiring both deep cover intelligence gathering and specialized operational support. Mr. Chen addressed the obvious concerns about operational security. The nature of your personal relationship actually enhances security rather than compromising it, he explained. You both have multiple layers of clearance, extensive training and compartmentalization, and proven track records of maintaining operational security under extreme pressure. More importantly, your mutual understanding of each other's work eliminates many vulnerabilities that typically arise when operatives try to maintain relationships with civilians. Sarah found her voice for the first time since entering the room. What happens if this experimental program fails? What happens to our careers if mixing personal and professional relationships proves to be a mistake? Colonel Hayes smiled for the first time during the meeting. Miss Martinez, your relationship has already been tested under conditions that would destroy most partnerships. You've maintained perfect operational security while dealing with serious injuries, classified medical treatment, and developing personal feelings. If you can handle that level of complexity successfully, we believe you can handle anything we might ask of you. The meeting continued for another hour, with detailed discussions of mission parameters, security protocols, and performance expectations. By the end, Sarah and Marcus had been offered something that seemed impossible just hours earlier, the chance to build a life together while serving their country in roles utilizing their unique combination of skills and experience. As they left the conference room, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since that day she sat silently in the hospital waiting room. The injury that had seemed like a career-ending setback had instead led her to Marcus, and their relationship had somehow evolved into an opportunity neither of them could have imagined. Marcus walked beside her in comfortable silence, both of them processing the magnitude of what they just experienced. The quiet girl from Texas, who joined the army to prove her strength, had found something she hadn't known she was looking for, a partner who understood not just her capabilities, but also the costs of the life she'd chosen. 3 months later, Sarah and Marcus deployed together on their first joint assignment, a complex operation requiring both her deep cover expertise and his specialized medical and tactical support. As their plane lifted off,